Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So we had a question that we wanted to ask you from an email. I'm going to read it to you. Salam Alaikum, Shaykh. I had a question for you regarding female genital mutilation and circumcision. From what I have read, the Quran only talks about male circumcision, and the Hadiths that talk about it are weak. But I have read that all four mazhabs, or schools of thought, more or less support it. I heard that mazhab Shafi'i says it's an obligation, mazhab Maliki says it's sunnah, mazhab Hanafi says it's makruh, and that mazhab Hanbali says it's an obligation. I find the fact that the mazhabs say it is an obligation or even sunnah or noble quite disturbing, and that a mufti from Dagestan wanted to make it legal because he followed the Shafi'i school of jurisprudence. These jurists claim that it makes women chaste and that it makes them clean. And Yusuf Al Qaradawi said that it has health benefits, even though the World Health Organization said it is extremely harmful and has no health benefits whatsoever. Some people say that the mazhabs only talk about a slight cut, but even then it is quite harmful and makes women sex tools for their husbands, gaining no pleasure for themselves. This topic is quite distressing, especially regarding what the mazhabs say, since even the slightest cut is harmful and decreases a woman's libido. I was wondering whether you could clarify this, especially since from what I understand, you follow the Shafi'i school of jurisprudence. Thank you so much for your time and faith, time and effort, Shaykh. You saved my faith. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, this question raises a number of issues. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. There are different forms of female genital mutilation, different levels of intrusiveness, surgical intrusiveness. Some involve removing the clitoris altogether. Some involve a nip or a small cut done to the clitoris. And some even involve the skin around the clitoris. But the question is whether any of these practices, whether the aggressive kind or the less aggressive kind, are either Islamically mandated, Islamically preferred, or even Islamically forbidden. So the evidence, as the person who sent this question notes, the hadith on this matter is not reliable. There is a tradition in which reportedly the Prophet ﷺ instructs a woman to cut lightly, and what has been taken from this is that the Prophet didn't forbid the woman to cut, but told her to be moderate and conservative, or to be non-intrusive in the cutting. There is a hadith that says that circumcision for men is obligatory, and for women it is a makrama, or something preferred, something of good nature. And there are other hadiths but none of these hadiths are reliable or dependable for a variety of reasons. All the hadiths that have occurred on this topic are problematic. The person asking the question says that In the Shafi'i school, it is obligatory. The Hanafi school, it is makruh. In the Maliki school, it is preferred. And in the Hanbali school, it is obligatory. I just want to warn that this description of the position of the various schools of thought, the different mazhab regarding the practice of female circumcision, occurred in a fatwa issued in Saudi Arabia. I forget if it was actually bin Baz who issued it or someone else. But no, it's actually Al-Uthaymiyin. So a Saudi mufti summarized the Islamic jurisprudence on it in the way that the questioner summarizes it. And then after it was summarized in that fashion in the Saudi fatwa, it was translated to English and was communicated over the social media. So in Wikipedia and things like that, that summation was repeated. The reason I emphasize this is that this summation of the purported positions of the Islamic mazhab on the issue of circumcision is a gross misrepresentation. It is a gross oversimplification of the debates back and forth within the various jurists of Islam. So, for instance, the Maliki jurist Ibn Abdul Barr says that there is no Islamic ruling on the issue of female genital circumcision. Someone like Ibn al-Mundhir says that the only thing that has been established, that's what he claims about female circumcision, is that it is makruh. Although Al-Uthaymiyin claims that the Hanbali school has supported female or even mandated female genital mutilation or female circumcision, that's actually not true, because a lot of Hanbali jurists opposed it. And because they opposed it, FGM was never practiced in Saudi. It's not, while you find it practiced in Egypt, for instance, but it's not practiced in Saudi. I'm not sure about the Yusuf Al Qaradawi statement. I'm not sure. I actually never read anything by Yusuf Al Qaradawi supporting FGM, so I'm skeptical about that claim. Yusuf Al Qaradawi, for political reasons, have been slandered and maligned in recent years, so I would be very careful before attributing anything to Yusuf Al Qaradawi. I would have to read it in something that I know he actually published, not something said about him, because of just the extent to which people have gone to slander Yusuf Al Qaradawi. But what's important to keep in mind here is that this is an issue, it's not a novel issue, it's an issue that since the dawn of the modern age, basically, there are generations of jurists, modern jurists, who have analyzed the evidence, who have addressed this issue. Even just recently, Dar al-Ifta in Egypt just issued, again for the millionth time, another fatwa saying that FGM is strictly prohibited in Islam. And the reason, the way that this works is that since we don't have a reliable sunnah from the Prophet about it. We have male circumcision is one thing, but female genital or female circumcision, you cannot say that there is a reliable sunnah that it is required or that it is preferred or that it is recommended or that it is cleaner or that it is better or anything. Then what is the basis of a Sharia ruling on something without a clear text? The basis for a Sharia ruling is empirical evidence, meaning medical evidence. It is what medicine tells us about the practice. God didn't command us to do it. So if medical evidence comes back and says that it is harmful to women, then the answer is clear. Then it's prohibited. If it says it limits the sexual pleasure of women, the answer is clear, because in Sharia we know that women have a right to sexual pleasure. That's not contested. They have a right to sexual pleasure. So anything that's going to limit their ability to enjoy sex would also be prohibited. And within the classical tradition, there have been within every mazhab, including the Shafi'i mazhab, there have been many jurists within the Shafi'i mazhab, there have been many jurists within the Hanafi mazhab and the Maliki mazhab and the Hanbali mazhab that basically based the ruling on their understanding of the empirical evidence. So a jurist who lived in an area where the FGM that was practiced, or the female circumcision that was practiced, was of a non-intrusive kind, who didn't see a harm in it and saw it as a social practice in medieval times, said, well, okay, so it's a social, cultural practice, so what's the harm in doing it? That's according to their understanding, their level of understanding at the time that they lived. Jurists who lived in areas in Africa, for instance, where FGM caused infections and often led to death and led to very horrendous mutilations and severe pain and difficulty urinating and so on, often concluded that it is haram, because that's what they were exposed to. Jurists who lived in areas where it was not practiced, like Arabia, for instance, basically said Islam has no ruling on it. So it is very important not to just, the issue is not whether Shafi'i jurists supported it or opposed it or so on. The issue is what were the basis for their rulings. And what everyone agrees on is that they're not basing their rulings on a solid sunnah or an authentic sunnah, or they're basing the rulings on their lived social and cultural experiences. At this stage, from what we know medically, I don't have any problem concluding that it is haram. Why? Because it seems, for one, it alters God's creation. In the case of male circumcision, it has become a symbol of belonging to the Abrahamic faith, because it used to distinguish monotheists from non-monotheists. It was the symbol of the covenant given to Abraham. So we have, and it's supported by the Quran, and it's supported by even in the Old Testament. So in the case of male circumcision, it's a completely different ballgame, and it doesn't interfere with sexual pleasure and so on and so forth. But female circumcision, we have no rationale for requiring it. It seems to only reaffirm and promote male patriarchy, and it seems to harm women, and we don't have any evidence that God commanded us to do it. So I don't have any difficulties concluding that it is probably haram and at the minimum makruh. Now, of course, I'm talking about even the ones that don't, I'm talking about the type of circumcision that cuts around the clitoris or something. But if you're talking about the circumcision that causes these infections and difficulty urinating, and there's no question that that's strictly haram. I mean, that we don't even get into. But I'm very comfortable saying that female genital or female circumcision is haram. It shouldn't be done. And you have to understand what the earlier jurists, even those who supported it, were basing their arguments on. It is not just, let's take the conclusion, whatever. And anyway, as I suspected, that summation comes strictly, directly lifted from, or the basis of that was a fatwa issued by the Saudi jurists, and it doesn't actually fairly or accurately represent what the Islamic legal tradition said about it. Does that answer the question?